Hi, this is Jim from Safety Wars. Before we start the program, I want to make sure everyone understands that we often talk about OSHA and EPA citations, along with some other regulatory actions from other agencies, legal cases, and criminal activity. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Proposed fines are exactly that, and they are often litigated, reduced, or vacated. We use available public records, news accounts, and press releases. We cannot warranty or guarantee the details of any of the stories we share, since we are not directly involved with these stories, at least not most of the time. Enjoy the show.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
From the border of liberty and prosperity and the highway to the north, this is Jim Polzel with Safety Wars. We have a pre-recorded program tonight. We are releasing the last interview from the International Conference on Climate Change that was held in Orlando, Florida last month. It's an interview from someone from the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, aka CFACT, at cfact.org. Her name is Shakira Jackson. She's a very inspiring person, and this was a very inspiring interview. I think the future of the environmental movement is in good hands with this one. We're also going to have a couple of other podcasts previously recorded that we're going to put in at the end of this interview. We look forward to be back here tomorrow night on the 31st. Okay, we are here with Shakira Jackson from CFACT. And she's a podcaster. She's also been involved in a lot of this stuff over the last couple of years.
Yes.
You're fairly young. It can't be too young.
Mm-hmm.
Not too long.
Not too long, but not too short.
It can't be too long. Right. So we're here in Orlando at the Heartland Institute conference, International Conference on Climate Change. I was a delegate here, what they called them back in the days, in 2008.
Wow.
So took some time off from all that, and we're interviewing people here. We interviewed Lord Monckton. Hopefully we'll be getting some more interviews. So we have Shakira from CFACT. She approached me on this. So Shakira, tell us about yourself and CFACT.
Absolutely. So CFACT is an environmental organization. We focus specifically from issues ranging from sustainability, nuclear energy, etc. We have a Treasons Fellow program that we do that really just inspires youth to get more involved in the environmental movement. One of the pillars also to our organization, we have a podcast/videocast that we also do called Capital Pink. And basically what that does is helps spread awareness about censorship on college campuses. And even outside of that, we focus specifically on educating the public about different issues such as nuclear energy, ESG, you name it, we got it. And yeah.
How long have you been involved with this?
So I started out as a fellow. I was a fellow back in 2019, and then I, graduated from undergrad, and now, currently working full time for the organization. But after that, I pretty much jump-started my entire career with CFACT from, testifying to the EPA, doing things that involve really just hands-on activism. So that's pretty much my timeline.
Where did you graduate from?
The University of Pittsburgh at Bradford.
Really? Mm-hmm. So, usually you just don't jump into that.
Yes.
Usually, take it from an old political guy. It's a long line, right? Mm-hmm. With me, I went to NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. That's right. Did my graduate work. I've been working on environmental cleanups and stuff way before that.
Yep.
Not happening. So, what drew you to the whole environmental thing?
Sure.
For lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. So I found, my first year of undergrad, I was always politically inclined, wanted to learn more about politics, but it wasn't until my first year of undergrad where, I joined the environmental science club, and I started seeing that, we were having conversations, but a lot of people were kind of, going back and forth, and nobody wanted to give anyone the floor.
Do you have an educational background in environmental science, or was it more political?
More political. I didn't study environmental science, although if I could do undergrad all over again, I would. But I barely.
I teach it.
You teach environmental science? Oh my goodness.
All right. And this is what I tell people, unless you have an angle, don't go into it. Because this is what's going on. You have in New Jersey, where I grew up, and I live in New York now, you have something like 20-some colleges offering environmental science, environmental studies, at all levels, right?
Yeah.
PhD, undergrad, associates, what have you, and masters. There are not, and they're graduating 300 to 400 people a year. There are not 300 or 400 jobs in New Jersey for that major. So unless you have an in somewhere, or you want to go into something more what you're talking about in the policy end, right, and everything else, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Right, and or you're going to have to go into a related field like safety, what I got into. So don't feel bad you didn't have that.
But one of the biggest things I find is that there's a lot of indoctrination happening, even with poli-sci, and I have friends, who studied environmental science, and they're like, man, the professor just, pushing their views, and it's like, I don't know,
That's nothing new.
Yeah, very
Nothing
true.
new. Nothing new.
Very sad, very, very sad, especially because you're paying all this money. I think for me, the reason why I decided to go to college in the first place was because I wanted to expand my critical thinking and analytical skills. But getting there, it's like, well, yeah, I know that you have your specific stance, but allow me to think for myself, allow me to be able to come up with my own viewpoints on things, versus you just shoving your own onto me.
Okay, so this might be, I'm going to ask you a question. It might offend you. I'm going to apologize.
Oh, no.
Again, all right, so when I was in college, right, a long time ago, and even graduate school, which wasn't that long ago, I graduated in 2003, so 20 years ago. African Americans in the environmental field did not exist. I mean, you go, in my major, I went to a small college in South Jersey. Now it's not so small. Now it's not a college anymore, it's a university. And you go to different events and different things, different activities. You don't see African Americans in environmental stuff. Since you're a recent graduate, is that your thing? And what have people said with you specifically? I mean, because I tell you what, CFACT's a great organization. I've heard about them for a long time, seen them at different events, things of that nature. What was the reaction for you to be in the environmental political movement, whatever we're calling this thing?
So for me, I mean, like you said, there's no secret that the equity and, equality, gender equality versus, even speaking to ethnics and race, all those things, the gaps has always exist. But I find it even with me growing up, so I'm originally from the city of Philadelphia. And one of the things that I really hone myself in doing is working with the local legislators of the city of Philadelphia, such as our mayor and, people that sit on city council. Just recently, I hosted an event in the city of Philadelphia, specifically called Color Girls Go Green. And my specific target audience was to get more minorities, people of color, just educated about environmental issues and what you can do to kind of help tackle this. Because you're right, there's definitely a gap. And I think it's just a lack of education. When you look at the education structure, specifically with the public and charter schools in the city of Philadelphia, they definitely don't necessarily tackle these environmental issues head on. And maybe students aren't even motivated to get into the field because of that gap.
And when you consider environmental justice field,
yes,
and everything, there are a lot of issues there with people of color.
Yep.
Right. Two of the things. Flint, Michigan, number one, with the water crisis. Number two, Mississippi has an ongoing water crisis.
Yes.
Several areas there. And when you consider a lot of the inner city neighborhoods and everything, they're still being impacted by petroleum lead, lead and gasoline in the soil, contaminated soils, brown fields, and everything else.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural tie-in, especially if you're in an environmental movement. This is a natural tie-in for those communities. And how would you describe yourself? Conservative, libertarian, non-affiliated, liberal? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so currently I identify as a conservative libertarian. Specifically, my views, they shaped from my two parents. I think, my mom, she's very much libertarian, but my dad's very, very conservative. And, just so happened I am a merge of the two, a representation of the two. But I think specifically, when it comes to different policies put forth, I find myself, like I said, putting in and honing in on my conservative and libertarian values because, at the end of the day, I do believe in freedom. I do believe in, justice and being able to stand up for what you believe in and not being censored and not being, and just putting yourself out there and being able to exercise your rights freely. And so, relating this back to the environmental issue, I think at this point and at this rate, it's not going to come down to, what specific ideology you have or, where you stand, because at the end of the day, the climate crisis or whatever, folks want to identify it as, whether you're libertarian, conservative, Democrat, doesn't matter. It's going to impact us all. So,
Yes.
I think that, now we're living in a time where identities are everything, right? It's like, oh yeah, I identify as this, but in reality, and that's one of the reasons I feel like drives me to, why I care about environmental issues more than social issues, because, I'm so tired of people like, saying like, oh, it's the label this, label that, and I get, you take different stance on different things, but there are more things I feel like that are more prominent, that people should be focusing on, outside of that, and you can even relate that back to, it was just, well, we're still in Black History Month, right? So I just did an interview, literally a few days ago. A guy was asking me, he goes, well, how do you feel about Black History Month, and should Black History Month be a thing? And I'm like, I would rather much identify as just an American, take my ethnicity, take all of that out of it. None of that matters. I am here, I'm proud, I'm a freedom fighter, I'm a patriot, and that's all I, would love to be labeled as.
I know I spoke to another person here, African American woman. She didn't want to come on here. She's more of a volunteer.
Sure.
We're at the International Climate Change Conference in Orlando here. And she echoed the same thing. She's very much concerned with the environment. She does not interested in meaningless. I believe that's the word she used. Environmental stuff, like a lot of what we're discussing here. Concerned about clean water, clean air,
Yep.
impacting the community in a positive way, and everything else. Now, where do you see this going in 10 years? The whole movement, what you're involved in, what we're discussing here, and everything. Where do you see that in 10 years? For 5 years or two? Pick a time frame.
Sure.
Where is the future?
So some of the work that I'm doing with CFACT is mobilizing youth to spread awareness about different issues such as, what's going on with ESG or what's going on with climate change, et cetera. And so the hope is that more young people will start to take initiative because after all, that people always say, as cliche as it may sound, young people are the future, and indeed they are. So, really kind of honing in and educating them now. So when those 10 years kind of hit, you have the generation now where they've been studying this, they know this like the back of their head. And so now we're putting in policies, that matter and that are pushing our stance forward, because as of right now, I don't think and it's not just take credit away from the generations that are in charge right now, but I do think to some capacity it's going to be up to, the youth right now to say, well, what's happening now, I see it for what it is, taking initiative, learning about how you can spread awareness and, cancel, or not even really cancel, but, just combat some of these issues that we're seeing within our environment, whether that be hydropower or solar or nuclear, et cetera, because it gets very, very big, very fast. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, as Lord Monta had mentioned earlier today, I believe he had a lecture here, but I had him on for like an hour and 10 minutes. And he laid out, if I spoke to no one here other than him, it's worth it for me to be here today. But
Sure.
now we got you. It's really worth it. Basically, we talk about sustainability, right? Environmental sustainability, and there are different labels on it, but this all originated in 1992, the Rio de Janeiro conference on the environment, and that's another story in itself. We could do a whole long history on that. But came the whole thing with sustainable development. What it turned out with him, one of his points was the environmental movement today is not sustainable as with these energy policies. Very, very, it's not sustainable for a whole host of reasons. One of them being is that we do not have the natural resources or the infrastructure to create all this stuff. Solar panels, wind turbines, even he talked about the power grid can't support this, everything, all this capacity. You're adding more capacity than what you commanded.
Sure.
Sustainable development, what's your opinion on that? I'm not on necessarily energy issues and climate change, but on everything. Since you don't know about this, so you didn't have to go through the beginning of it.
Sure.
You've had to deal with it last couple of years. What's your opinion on it?
Well, I think when it comes to the sustainability issue, I tend to think about it more from, a micro and then going to the macro level. Sometimes when people first think of the word environmental, policies, like, well, what does that mean to you? People go straight to climate change, and although hence, this conference, climate change, whatever, but I do think there are other issues out there that we could be focusing on, and, thinking about the pillars that make up why climate change, whether you believe it exists or whether you don't, is a hot topic or just a talking point in general, right? And even spreading awareness to, how you can use reusable resources. And like you mentioned earlier about the whole solar panel things. And, there are a lot of people who own homes who, don't have, or just don't know that the little things that they could be doing, like, importing a, solar panel or whatever the case may be, creating a garden or, doing those small pillar things that may seem small, but they're really making a big difference. I organized a lot of litter cleanups. I have that. I did not during more of my community. So I think when you think about what sustainability means and what that looks like, it is those small things leading up to the big scope of things. And personally, my opinion on what legislators have been doing, I don't think that they've been kind of keeping the momentum going when it comes to the idea of sustainability. Right? I think when you think about how different policies have been put forth to the floor and whether they've gone or they've passed or, even just the topic of conversation. It seems as though our legislators are always focused specifically more on social issues rather than the question of environmental issues. And it's not to say that those social issues aren't important, but I do think to some capacity, right, if you don't have a world to live on to,
Yes.
to talk about these social issues, then why, you know what I mean? Why even do it in this?
A quote from a pedologist, a soil scientist, I've been following on LinkedIn. It all comes down to 6 inches of topsoil. That's what it is. If you cannot protect those 6 inches of topsoil, there ain't no food.
Yep.
There is no clean water. There's nothing out there. That's what we need to, and I think we've lost sight of that.
Oh, yeah.
So, anything else you want to add to this? I think this has been really good.
Indeed, I agree. Well, I would just end with some words of encouragement because, hence what I do. I love to motivate people. I love to get people out and joining the movement. It would just be to make sure whatever you're doing, really just hone in on it and really start to reflect on why you care about specific issues, specific policies. I think that's so important, especially living in this day and age. And if you're a young person listening to this, really just encouraging you to join the environmental movement because it's so prominent. And whether you have an interest or background in environmental science or, environmental policy, it doesn't matter. Like, take the leap, one research a day or whatever, however you want to do it. Like, that could go a really long way. You don't necessarily have to be the person on the, the front lines advocating for this stuff, but we need all the help that we can get. And I think it's this conference right here, which is, mobilizing people from across the world that care about specific issues. This is the grassroots and where it starts. And so, just go out, fight, go green, and hope to see you guys soon.
Fight that safety war.
Yes, fight that safety war indeed.
Environmental safety. And I'll add this. Don't be manipulated, be informed.
Yes.
So, thanks a lot, Shakira. This has been great. And I look forward to seeing you at more of these events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
The following program is rated for mature audiences. It may contain adult language, adult situations, and frank safety discussions. The names and certain details have been changed to protect the safe and the unsafe. But believe me, every item in here is true. Cultural pushback strategies faced by safety professionals. Today on Safety Wars. Ultimately, in any discussion with younger safety professionals and managers, the question comes up as to how do I manage a workforce that seems to be 100% against safety? How do I engage my workforce and try to change corporate culture, often when I'm getting so much pushback by the corporate culture? The corporate culture refuses to change, and we have a horrible one when it comes to safety. I always refer people back to Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. It turns out that no one ever reads them or follows it up, so I tend to teach it myself. I offer no solutions, you gotta find out what those are for yourself, but I do identify some behaviors and some stories that I have on each one of these. Who was Saul Alinsky? He was a community organizer in Chicago that witnessed the violence of the late 1960s at the Democratic National Convention. He went out to the crowd and said, look, you're doing it all wrong, and to effect change, you don't do it by violence, but by organization, hard work, and struggle. When I began reading these rules, I noticed that these rules are some of what we have to deal with as safety professionals. We're trying to change corporate culture a lot of times. We're trying to change it to a safer one, more productive one where everybody works together, the best they can, of course. So I also realized that it was being used by us, not only against us, but by us against the workforce. This ends up in a situation where everybody hates each other. So I spent a couple years thinking about this stuff and presented it as a 1.5 hour filler to a HAZWOPER refresher course for young managers over at New Jersey City University who asked about how to manage safety when you're dealing with a workforce that seems to be 100% against them. It was one of the few mic drop moments that I have had in my career. I've also presented this to several organizations, so if you're easily triggered, this might not be the discussion for you. By the way, we should not use the word enemy when dealing with our coworkers, but it's in with the original text, and I want it to be true to the original text. Rule number 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. As a safety professional, you're hired to help a company with a problem or issue. You may be there for long-term, short-term, you may be coming in as a consultant, doesn't matter what it is. If you are lucky, the company has a well-established program and a fully self-actualized team. If you're not lucky, it seems like I was not very lucky, you are probably being brought in to manage a problem that is best handled by human resources. You realize that the company needs some type of cultural change. So how does this rule manifest itself? This could be as simple as, I have worked here for a very long time, Jim, and I am a, insert your favorite relationship or association. Could be brother, father, son, daughter, mother, doesn't matter. Then it's followed up with something along the lines of, leave me alone and don't rock the boat or I'll make trouble. This can be done overtly or it can be implied. Often this is the reason why a company hires you, to manage their problems. The end result is that you cannot do your job effectively and you lose it. The problem's staff or team keeps theirs, and what happens ultimately? People continue to get hurt or get injured or die at some places. You don't do your job, you get frustrated, you get angry, you get bitter, and everything else. And you go on to your next assignment, repeating the same issues again and again and again. You find out that the folks who gave you this idea and made this threat to you, don't rock the boat, are not well respected in the organization to begin with, and they basically lied and intimidated you. So what do? You try to identify these situations early and handle them early before they get out of hand. Number 2 and number 3 go together. Number 2 is never go outside the expertise of your people, or yourself for that matter. And number 3, whenever possible, go outside of the expertise of the enemy. So you can see how these two go together. So, never go outside the expertise of your people. Provide expertise and advice about what you know. Tread carefully into areas you have no expertise in. It's better off that you say, hey, look, I'm not sure on that. Let me double check. And always double check if you're not sure. Triple check. Get someone who does have the expertise. The worst thing that you can be in, among others, right? One of the worst is you might be told that you are wrong and the worst way, and it destroys your credibility. They won't listen to you ever again. But that's what you got to do. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. One strategy that people try to undermine you with is to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are. They probe what those are. Then they concentrate on what you know. This often becomes an old-fashioned game of distraction. A good example of this is what I run into all the time, but I got a little bit wiser for it over the years. You're auditing one trade. You mention that there is a problem there, minor problem. Or it may be a major problem that they really don't want to address because it's going to take time to fix. And you're told, why are you worrying about this? You should be worrying about whatever's going on upstairs. They're doing some type of real activity. Maybe it's a forklift operation or another operation where someone's working very unsafely. So you go upstairs and you find out there is nobody up there. Now this is not happening. And they just send you on a wild goose chase. For a good laugh, Google South Park, the Chewbacca defense, or South Park Chef Aid or Chewbacca defense. You'll find a huge number of articles on this strategy online, and it's made it into pop culture. What is the Chewbacca defense? It refers to making a legal argument, the aim of which is to deliberately distract and confuse the jury with the use of a red herring. Sometimes these traps are unavoidable, but you need to be aware of them. In our next broadcast, we're going to continue with this theme of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals in Rules for Radicals, Part 2. For Safety Wars, this is Jim Posel.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
The following program is rated for mature audiences and may contain adult language, adult situations, and frank safety discussions. The names and certain details have been changed to protect the safe and the unsafe. But believe me, every item in here is true. I hope you enjoyed Rules for Radicals. So, like I said, you need to be aware of these strategies. Be very careful in using them. I don't recommend you use them at all, but you need to be aware of them. Rule number 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. Before enforcing a rule, make sure you're going to be the one obeying it also. Don't make a rule you don't intend to enforce. This is also a legal problem if you have a rule book that says you're going to do X, Y, and Z and you don't do it. You blow your credibility with everybody, and it does not have a good outcome. So this could be as easily as telling someone to wear a hard hat, then not wearing one. Today we're dealing with masks. How does this also manifest itself? Here's a classic one. If you need to do a gas test of a confined space continuously, and you decide not to do it because it's really not necessary, management will always drag out that thing you didn't do in one of your annual reviews. Well, you were supposed to be enforcing X, Y, and Z rule, and you didn't do it, and you ruined the corporate culture. It doesn't matter that the management told them to disobey you, for example, or disobey a rule, or not pay attention to safety. And it's just as important not to make a rule you cannot follow or enforce. I mentioned that again. So what are some rules that you cannot follow and cannot enforce? One of them is decontamination of individuals. I was actually asked to enforce a decontamination policy at a hazardous waste site. I said, well, we make sure that everybody goes through the glove wash and the glove rinse, but are they taking showers? Well, guess what? I'm not going in the shower, and I'm not going to watch them take a shower. That's what their intent was for me to go in and watch people take showers. Why? Because then we can be brought up on a sexual harassment type situation or something like that and make me be undermined, make me look bad on site that now I'm watching people take showers. You really can't make this stuff up. Rule number 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There really is no defense against it. When does this happen? It's when you have potential to achieve or when you have already gotten success. People who use ridicule often do it behind your back anonymously. It's also a leading indicator of jealousy, wanting to take someone down. It's often to get you to lose your temper. And if you lose your temper, that's what their end goal is to make you look foolish. What's the strategy for dealing with this? They are varied and many. What I try to do is not take myself too seriously and don't show that I get upset, even if I do get upset. Getting upset invites more ridicule. Try to get the leadership of the team on board with safety, and usually the group will follow the leadership, and that's a subject for another broadcast. Don't ever let them see you sweat. Rules 6 and 7. A good tactic is one your people enjoy, and number 7, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. These rules work to our advantage and sometimes disadvantage. Learn an activity that the workforce enjoys. It's easy to do, hopefully is cheap and gives effective results. When you use an old safety program that does not work anymore, or is stale, or the team can't relate to it, you will have failure every time. Rule number 8, keep the pressure on. Many rules can be used against you or by you. If something bad happens, or if someone finds a weak spot, they focus on it, repeating the attack or casually mentioning it, especially at inopportune moments, like during your annual review. Once someone finds your weak spot, they will focus on it and try to undermine you. What do you do about this? Know your weak spots ahead of time and make sure they are fixed, or at least you have a way to manage them. If the work is being deliberately undermined by your workforce, document it and then follow it up with human resources. These situations will often make it into your annual review, which I mentioned a couple of times. Managed correctly, you have a defense. Maybe you can manage it, maybe you could fix it. This is one reason why we track near misses, good catches, mishaps, and etc. So we can fix them, so we can prevent injuries in the workplace, so we can actually do our job. Number 9. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. This is a case of your imagination being your own worst enemy. People who have been at rock bottom and have worked their way out of it will tell you that rock bottom isn't so scary after all. Something not being scary can't be used as a threat. If you are not intimidated, you completely disarm the other party, the other person. Number 10. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. These tactics manifest themselves in many ways, including calling you on days off to ask questions that can be left until your return. On the same day, people coordinate and come to you with all their problems. Usually, this is not a coincidence. Changing paperwork, losing paperwork, and then blaming everybody else, especially you. Stealing resources. It could be something as simple as a dry erase marker for a presentation to taking critical equipment. General sabotage and favoritism. What do? Continue to do your job and be professional. One result of these tactics is to get a reaction out of you. Then the perpetrators play the victim card and report you as the problem. Document these situations, secure your own resources, documents, and equipment. Call people out professionally when they try these tactics. One time I had my desk repeatedly searched and things go missing. I noticed some of the items were on the vice president's desk. I reported to management that items from my desk were missing. This particular vice president gaslighted me, you can look at the previous episodes for this, and said, "No one is going through your stuff, you are being ridiculous." The next week I acquired a locking file cabinet to secure things. 2 weeks later, the vice president said in front of several of my coworkers, "I was looking for something in your desk and I noticed your locked file cabinet." She was exposed for what she did and what she denied doing, and everyone got a good laugh. If you push a negative, this is rule number 11, if you push a negative hard and deep enough, it will break through to its counterside. Make a negative into a positive. I had a shop steward complain to me that one of the other contractors on a project was allowed to break site rules without any type of repercussion. He told me that I should be arguing on his team's behalf in front of the people paying me, the general contractor. I knew that if I did as he asked on this issue, I would likely be thrown off the project. This was his main goal. I told him that his ideas had merit. And remember, we were in front of the entire workforce. We'll call him Charlie. I said, "Charlie, you're very good at arguing. Your points have a lot of validity. So why don't we go up in front of site management, and I'll be right behind you, buddy, and you can argue these points and make these demands and everything for them, for your workforce, right? Better than I can." He knew that if he did that, he would be thrown off the project, and that the union, which he was an officer in, would be in a very precarious situation. The union workforce seemed satisfied with this whole thing. When he did not follow through, it made him look bad. What was the end result? He never confronted me in front of so many people again. I kept a cool head, and it turned out in my favor. People will often make themselves into the victim, and this is what this guy was trying to do. Make himself into the victim and me the oppressor. You need to really watch out for this trap. Rule number 12. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. What does this mean? Offer a solution. Just don't say something is wrong. Turn it into a positive. Offer a yes if situation rather than a no because. If you have no alternative plan, you look like you're proverbial blowhard or a malcontent. Rule number 13, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. This is basically a team member dividing and conquering. There are several different ways of doing this, but it's essentially old-fashioned bullying. Some of the more obvious ways. Being excluded from meetings or not being invited to meetings you probably should attend. Not having the correct equipment, breaking equipment, unreasonable time frames, rushing an accident investigation. That's one of the classic ones. Not having resources, time, or personnel to do the job. Not budgeting for professional training or development. Not having a scope of work for a contract. Colluding with others or simply bullying you. Overloading you with work. Distracting you from duties. Team members doing work on projects you know nothing about, then making you responsible for them. Blindsiding you. Surprising you with information or situations that need your attention immediately, at least in their mind, or put you in a bad situation. There's not much you can do to counteract this except document it, report it to Human Resources, and considering moving on. Don't let these tactics get the best of you. Try to rise above it. Revenge or vindication are always fleeting, and these people are usually not worth your time, your effort, or your soul. What's my point? You need to get away from toxic work environments. A positive safety culture is very difficult to achieve as it is. Having a culture working against you makes it even more difficult. Hopefully these rules will give you information on what to expect in your role as a safety manager. When you are a manager, Recognize these behaviors at your company and work towards cultivating people and managing them in a positive way. Changing safety culture does not happen overnight. It takes years in the absence of a catastrophic event. Managing people and situations effectively will ultimately save lives and prevent injuries. Isn't that why we are all safety people in the end? For Safety Wars, this is Jim Polzel.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Warning! The following podcast contains adult language, adult content, weird and unusual stories that all happen to be true. We didn't start this war on safety, but we're going to fight that safety war and we're going to win it. Warning! Warning! You are about to hear a Jim Polzel mega rant. You've been warned. Be the leaders that we need to be. Take that servile attitude and be empowered. You have the knowledge. You have the backbone, get it. If you don't have it, get the backbone. So this is going to be a little bit different and maybe getting back to our roots here. Right? We've gotten away from our roots here on Safety Wars. Today, the Safety Show. Today on Safety Wars. I'm going to share a story about a visit to my medical provider. I have a very important question later on and some comments on this. We've all been on jobs, especially if you grew up in the hazmat industry like I did, where there's a perception of little or no risk, and we seem like we're overprotected, which translates into wearing loads of PPE for no apparent reason. No apparent reason to the untrained and inexperienced, but in reality, we're protecting ourselves from likely potential hazards. We have it go the other way, too. There is no respiratory hazard at all, by any means we can measure, calculate, speculate on, or anything else. Or we're using the wrong PPE, and what happens in the end? We lose credibility, nobody wants to deal with us, right? We deal with that all the time. Yeah, everybody makes a bad call every once in a while. Those work modes that we talk about in previous episodes. Now, there's an error rate. Sometimes you make an error, but usually you can recover and everything else. Now let's talk about COVID. Right, you can recover from that previous situation because nobody gets hurt, right? Now let's talk about COVID. Right, I've been wanting to say this for a long time here, but you know what? I've been holding back, but we can't hold back anymore. We've had conflicting information from day one. Whether it's on masks or respirators, social distancing, you name it, there's conflict. There's inconsistencies. Right now, in a lot of our workplaces, a lot of our organizations, in our lives, in our setting, everywhere where we go, we're putting on what I call the safety show. What's the safety show? The show we put on just to look like we're looking safe and we're being safe. And it's doing Jack Gouveneau. Alright? You know what that means if you're a listener. It looks good. Maybe we get minimal protection out of it. I'm going to tell you about the trip to my doctor's office. Now, let's back up. We know that safety is not the absence of hazards. 0 accidents, 0 illnesses, 0 injuries, 0, 0, 0, 0. We know that the modern definition is the presence of safeguards. Modern definition, how do these safeguards that we talk about work in a COVID world? We have vaccinations, obligatory medical screening, including temperature checks, questions, maybe something else, I don't know. Things happen with doctors, medical situation, socially distanced, we wash our hands. The medical facility I go to, immaculate. I tell you what, you could probably eat off the floor, seriously. We have medical treatments available, more are on their way, thank God. We try to stay home if we're sick, we're not feeling well. And of course, the masks. I'm going to tell you the truth, I don't wear a mask. And you say, what, Jim, you don't wear a mask? Come on. No, I don't wear a mask. I always wear a filtering face piece respirator. Either a NIOSH certified N95 respirator or an FFP2 European certified or rated respirator without the valve on it. So I'm not putting viruses in the air if I'm infected. So all these respirators, N95, FFP2, KN95 from China, we're told that they're pretty much all equivalent to each other. And they verified that through scientific testing and everything else. The powers that be, they're all the same pretty much. And by the way, as long as they don't have exhalation valves, we're good. If I was exposed to bodily fluids in a medical setting, maybe, I would obviously need more protection, like an N95 surgical mask with the liquid rating on it from ASTM, or some kind of a face shield or something like that. Okay, I'm okay with wearing masks if that's the requirement of where I'm going, like a medical facility that has sick people, at-risk people, others that need some type of protection from me or I need it from them. And I also wear them around areas that I don't feel comfortable with. I have my family mask up all the time. I took my father to Atlantic City a couple weeks ago. We had a great time at the craps tables. We were in masks. That's the way it is. I wasn't comfortable with some of the situations I saw there. We were in close quarters, everything else. Indoors. So I'm headed over to my medical facility this week. This is what happened. True story. By the way, they're getting a copy of this. I walk in after the temperature check with a nice lady. She was like a greeter at Walmart. They make sure I have an appointment. I'm where I'm supposed to be. Right? It's a huge campus that they have. They hand me an imitation surgical mask and tell me to wear it where I can't see my doctor. It looks like a surgical mask, but it's really one of those cheap imitation, low quality things that you get at, let's say, a discount store, maybe a warehouse, home improvement store for like $5 for 50 of them. There's an imitation. I said, just to let I'm wearing a rated mask here. Like offers me a lot more protection from that. Why are you asking me to put on something that has less protection than what I already have? And by the way, you get more for just as much protection because it's a rated mask. We know this. Last year I went through this, and they had to change their guidance there. I think because of me and maybe some other people that complained. And so you can wear that mask, but you have to put this one over it. So now what have I just walked into? It's called the safety show. That's what I walked into. The safety show. I tell the lady, and I reiterate, well, you gotta wear this, sir. Okay, I gotta go. Doctor's appointment, I gotta go. I put the mask on, and I go with the flow on a pro forma basis, and just, hey, I got somewhere I gotta be. Now, here's the whole thing. Have you ever been in an organization or a situation where you've had to push something that's less safe just to go along with the program? Whether it's PPE or a procedure, or maybe you're reading a script and everything else. Everyone knows it's a script and everything else. Now, I understand the liability. Just this week, there was a lawsuit filed in Wisconsin where a child got sick and the school was allegedly not following CDC guidelines. Therefore, the parents believe that the school is liable for their child's illness The illnesses allegedly spread to other family members and everything else. Now, I hope everybody made a full recovery here, but this kid was wearing a mask. They didn't say what kind of mask, but it was. I'm assuming it's one of these imitation masks. Imitation respirators, I'm sorry. So the school was not following safety procedures, their own procedures. And if you're in a workplace, you don't follow your own procedures, and you have any type of injury, including COVID, you could potentially be liable. And by the way, COVID does not have an exemption as of today, October 14th, 2021. It's got to go on the OSHA 300 log, unlike a common cold or the flu. So now, you're not following the CDC guidelines. Right? My family member and me got sick, now you're liable. Now, even if this is dismissed, what do you got to do? You got to spend money on time and litigation. Even if you win, you lose. I'm going to translate. Even if you win, you lose because you're out money and time and moral hazard and everything else. Here's my point here. One of my points. Do we make recommendations and rules in our organizations that we know are baloney? There, I said it. They won't reduce injuries, illnesses, or anything else just to put on the safety show for everybody. I tell you what, you pull this crap a couple of times, especially in the organizations I deal with, you're not going to be there too long. It undermines you, the situation, and now let's see. Contradictory and ineffective information. That's what we've been bombarded by. Now, people trust the movement here on the internet, on TikTok. I have a neighbor whose daughter has been tested at like 150 IQ, but whatever that TikTok says, she's going to listen to it. Whenever YouTube said, oh, we're going to listen to it. A year ago, I came out with a video before all of this on respiratory protection. Well, hell, no, he's been doing this for 29 years. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I've been doing it for 29 minutes on YouTube. I looked something up. Oh, this is the stuff. Maybe all this contradictory information is adding to our societal disruptions. Everybody's at each other's throats. We actually had a couple of weeks ago, a colleague of mine had, more accurately, a situation where people were getting beat up on account of these procedures, physically. Beat up. Wait until this emergency regulation comes out, if it comes out. We're in for a ride. If you're a safety person, make sure you have your life insurance paid up. Make sure you have your will. Because I tell you what, people are going to get killed over this, or their careers are going to be ruined for enforcing these rules. What's your organization going to do? Maybe you got to get that in writing, like I was talking to Sheldon Premise the other day. Hey, get everything in writing, right? That podcast is coming out in a couple of weeks. We've been doing this. This is the beginning of last year, and things are not getting better. They're getting worse. The workplaces are getting more acerbic, people, negative, and everything else that I visit. So what do we do here? What should have been done, right? We can't go about what should have been done. What can we do now? So what do we do in the future? You got to be honest with people. Don't treat them like idiots. That might be the right way to go, rather than issuing rules and making policies for show. Especially these policies that give no protection at all or minimum. Maybe they're gonna get a sense of security, put them into harm's way. Maybe make us look like idiots. Maybe we should be honest with the people. Explain what the respiratory protection is. And everything else. Here's something to consider. I consider myself pretty well informed. I used to be a news junkie. Since COVID came in, I'm not a news junkie anymore. I watch the news, it aggravates me, and I leave. You wouldn't rely. Well, let me ask this. You're sick. You have a health issue. Your child has a health issue. Are you going to go to a safety professional for that? Or are you going to go to a medical doctor? Chances are you're going to go to a medical doctor, I would hope. Hell, nowadays people go to Dr. Google and Dr. Facebook and Dr. TikTok. And Dr. TikTok is the latest one on the scene. I don't know, maybe I'm out of date on that. You wouldn't go out there and ask a safety professional for medical advice, would you? Okay, now here's the question. Medical providers, highly trained, highly educated. Hopefully yours is very competent, like mine are. Maybe you have good insurance and everything else that goes into it. How much respiratory protection training has a doctor had, a typical doctor? Maybe they've had the right to know stuff. Maybe they've had, hey, medical procedure with bio-level safety. If they're working in a bio-level safety 4 lab or something like that, okay, great. But you're not going to go for the safety professional for medical advice. Why are we going to a doctor for advice on respiratory protection? Either this is a real hazard or not. This is a real hazard. 700,000 people dead. At a certain point, someone's got to say something. Why are we going to... We have to ask ourselves, as a society, am I going to go to a safety professional with 30... it doesn't have to be 30. 1 year of experience dealing with respiratory hazards? What's safe? What's not safe? What's this? What's that? What are we going to do? We're going to go to that person to talk about respiratory hazards, biological safety, or highly trained, credentialed people in this field, been dealing with it all their careers? Or are we going to go to a medical doctor? Which one? Come on, this is what the questions we have to ask. Why have these networks? Why have the CDC, Dr. Fauci, I don't care who it is, how come they haven't said, you know what, we're going to turn over this meeting for 15 minutes, and even Governor Cuomo, we're going to turn this over to a certified industrial hygienist to try to explain to us what we need to do, what our goals are, what the limitations are. This person has been experienced in 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, board certified, highly credentialed, highly studied person in all this stuff in science. Let's have him or her go up there and explain things. Well, I mean, that might be good. Or, hey, let's go with a certified safety professional. The certified safety professional is an expert on managing people, managing threats to the workplace, and some public health. So let's try to get that person in there. I know the public health service is loaded up with CSP and CIHs. We know that. Can't get those people up there to maybe explain things? Hey, this is what we need to do. There's not one charismatic person out there willing to do that ever? Come on. Sick of it. 700,000 people dead. And this is what we're going. Millions worldwide. And here we are, wasting time, wasting money, looking like a bunch of whack jobs out here. Servile. Yeah, go back to your servile safety professional. We have an opportunity here, people. We have an opportunity to go out there and be the leaders that we're called to be. We have the responsibility, God-given. If you don't believe in God, then from nature, whatever it is you believe in, has given you an opportunity, and has given you knowledge, and has given you resources. Have backbone. That's what my message is. So, these are some of the questions and some of the thoughts I've had here. Right? On this, the 20th anniversary of the anthrax cleanups, where we've had an issue with a biological issue, it seems like every 2 or 3 years, and nobody could get their stuff together. I can't wait for the comments to get on this, right? These are some of the questions that we got to answer here. Some of the stuff we have to confront. Be the leaders that we need to be. Take that servile attitude and be empowered. You have the knowledge, you have the backbone, get it. If you don't have it, get the backbone. Now we have a choice. We're going to continue supporting what we know is wrong, this safety show that we're putting on, You're going to let other people call the shots, or we're going to have to be the leaders here in our society. Be that leader that you need to be. For Safety Wars, this is Jim Polzel.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.